The storm didn't just bring rain, it brought chaos. Streets became rivers, homes turned into ruins, and lives were forever changed. For Jamal, a 13-year-old boy from the poorest neighborhood in the city, survival had always been a battle. But this time, the stakes were unimaginable. "Stay inside!" an old woman shouted from her doorstep, her voice trembling as the floodwaters rose around her. But Jamal didn't listen. He couldn't. With a loaf of bread clutched in his arms, his family depended on him. Each step he took in the icy, knee-high water was a gamble. Then he heard it, a sharp, desperate cry that pierced through the roar of the storm. A baby. Jamal froze, his heart pounding. As he turned, his eyes locked on a stroller spinning wildly in the rushing current. The baby inside screamed, its tiny fists flailing. The water surged, dragging the stroller closer to a yawning storm drain, ready to swallow it whole. "Someone! Help!" Jamal's voice cracked, but the street was deserted. He was the only one who could save that child. This wasn't a choice. This was a moment that would define everything. Jamal's life, his family's future, and a truth he couldn't yet understand. All would hinge on what he did next. Jamal didn't think. He moved. Throwing the bread onto a floating piece of debris, he lunged into the water. The current was stronger than he'd imagined, pulling at his legs and threatening to drag him under. His sneakers slipped on the pavement, and icy water soaked through his clothes, cutting into his skin like shards of glass. "Hold on!" he shouted, his voice trembling with both fear and determination. The stroller tilted, the baby's cries growing shriller. Jamal's chest tightened as he fought against the torrent, his arms outstretched. His fingers just grazed the handle of the stroller. "Come on!" he growled through gritted teeth, summoning every ounce of strength. A broken branch crashed into his side, nearly toppling him. Jamal gritted his teeth, planted his feet, and lunged again. This time, his fingers locked around the handle. He yanked the stroller upright just as it teetered dangerously close to the drain. The baby's wide, terrified eyes met his, its cries subsiding for a moment as Jamal held the stroller tightly. Relief washed over him, but the battle wasn't over. He was still in the water, the current fighting to rip them both away. With the baby cradled in his arms, Jamal turned and began the agonizing trek back to dry ground. Every step was a fight, the water pulling at his legs as if it refused to let them go. "You're okay now," Jamal whispered to the baby, his voice shaking. "I've got you." The baby hiccuped, its tiny fingers clutching his soaked hoodie. Jamal's breaths came in gasps, his muscles screaming as he climbed onto the cracked sidewalk. He collapsed onto his knees, clutching the child to his chest. Looking around, he realized the streets were still empty. The stroller lay overturned, its contents spilling into the flood. And whoever had been pushing it, gone. Jamal's stomach sank. Where were the baby's parents? Were they swept away in the flood? The thought hit him like a punch to the gut. "I can't leave you here," he murmured, his voice trembling as the baby let out another pitiful cry. "You're coming with me." As Jamal trudged home through the waterlogged streets, his mind raced. What was he supposed to do with a baby? His family barely had enough to survive. But as the child clung to him, he felt a strange, fierce resolve building inside. This wasn't just an act of bravery. It was the start of something far bigger than Jamal could have ever imagined. Jamal pushed the door open to his apartment, his arms still tightly cradling the baby. The dim light from a single bulb flickered, casting long shadows across the cramped room. His mother, Anita, was wringing water out of soaked clothes on the floor. She looked up, her face etched with exhaustion. "Jamal, where have you—" Her words stopped mid-sentence as her eyes landed on the tiny bundle in his arms. "Whose baby is that?" Anita's voice rose, her hands frozen mid-motion. "There was nobody else, Mama," Jamal said, his voice trembling. "The stroller. It was about to go into the drain. I couldn't just leave it." Anita stood, her hands twitching as if she wanted to grab the baby but wasn't sure if she should. "Lord have mercy, Jamal. A baby? This ain't no place for a child. We barely have enough for us, and now—" "Please, Mama," Jamal interrupted, his voice urgent. "We can't just send her back out there. She's all alone." Before Anita could respond, a small voice piped up from behind them. Jamal's 6-year-old sister, Kiara, peeked out from under a blanket she'd wrapped around herself. "A baby," she whispered, her wide eyes filled with wonder. Jamal knelt down to show her. "Yeah, Kiara, she's so little," he said softly. The baby hiccuped and let out a soft cry. "She's hungry," Anita muttered, her voice softer now. She stepped forward, finally reaching out to take the baby. As she wrapped a clean towel around the child, her maternal instincts kicked in despite her reservations. "We'll need formula," she said, almost to herself. "But Lord knows where we'll find that around here." Over the next few days, the apartment became an improvised haven. The baby's cries filled the small space, mixing with the sound of rain still pounding against the windows. Anita managed to find a neighbor, Mrs. Louise, who begrudgingly offered an old can of formula. "A white baby in a black family's house?" Mrs. Louise muttered as she handed over the tin. "You're asking for trouble, Anita. You know how people get." Anita ignored her, but the weight of those words hung heavy in the air. "Who's her mama and daddy?" Kiara asked one night, stroking the baby's tiny fingers. Jamal hesitated. "I don't know, Kiara," he admitted, "but for now, we're all she's got." On the 7th day, everything changed. Anita sent Jamal to the corner store to buy rice and beans with the last few dollars they had. As he waited in line, voices from a small TV mounted above the counter caught his attention. "Millionaire's kid still missing," a man said, shaking his head. "A whole week, and no sign of her. She's probably gone." Jamal froze, his breath catching as the news anchor's voice filled the store. "The Caldwell family, known for their tech empire, has announced a $1 million reward for the safe return of their daughter, Lily Caldwell, who went missing during last week's flood." Jamal's heart stopped as the screen flashed a photo of a baby. Her baby. Those same chubby cheeks, the same bright eyes he had stared into as he pulled her from the floodwaters. The bread and beans fell from his hands. Jamal stumbled out of the store, the weight of what he'd just learned crushing him. Back at the apartment, Jamal burst through the door. "Mama, look!" he shouted, thrusting a crumpled newspaper into Anita's hands. Anita scanned the article, her face paling with every word. "Lord help us," she whispered, sinking into a chair. "That's her, Mama. Lily Caldwell. She's a millionaire's kid," Jamal said, pacing the room. "They're offering $1 million for her safe return." $1 million? Anita looked at her son, her expression conflicted. "Jamal, that money, it could change everything. But what if they think we took her? What if they call the cops on us?" Jamal stopped pacing. "We didn't do anything wrong. I saved her life. They'll understand that, right?" Before Anita could respond, a knock at the door shattered the tension. Both mother and son froze. "Don't move," Anita whispered, her voice trembling. She peeked through the peephole, her face tightening as she whispered, "It's the cops." Jamal's heart raced as Anita pressed a finger to her lips, signaling him to stay silent. She stepped back, clutching Lily tightly. "What do we do, Mama?" Jamal asked, his voice barely audible. "We stay quiet," Anita said firmly, "and we pray they don't find her." The knocks grew louder, more insistent, but eventually they stopped. Anita collapsed onto the couch, clutching Lily as if her life depended on it. Jamal sat beside her, his mind spinning. "Mama, we can't keep her here. Tyrone's already sniffing around. Now the cops are too. We're trapped." Anita looked at her son, her expression weary but resolute. "We'll figure it out, Jamal. But right now, we've got to keep her safe, no matter what." As the baby stirred in Anita's arms, Jamal stared at the door, the shadows outside shifting under the dim hallway light. He couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out. Jamal sat by the window, peeking through the curtain's edge. The hallway outside their apartment was quiet, but it felt too quiet. He'd seen Tyrone earlier that day, standing near the corner store with 2 of his men. Their eyes had followed Jamal like wolves tracking prey. "Jamal," Malik's voice called softly from behind. His father, usually calm and composed, looked tense. "You've got to stay away from them. Tyrone's not the kind of man who lets things go. If he thinks we've got the baby—" "He knows," Jamal interrupted. "I saw the way he looked at me. He knows we have her." Anita joined them, holding Lily close. "This can't go on," she said, her voice trembling. "We're running out of time. Between the cops and Tyrone, it's only a matter of days before they break that door down." "What do we do, Dad?" Jamal asked, his voice rising. "If they find her, if they find us—" "We leave," Malik said firmly. His tone left no room for argument. "Tonight. We can't stay here any longer." The family packed quickly, gathering what little they could carry. Jamal stuffed bottles of formula and blankets into a small bag, while Anita wrapped Lily tightly in layers to keep her warm. Malik unfolded a worn city map on the table, tracing a route through alleys and back streets. "We'll head to the old mechanic's shop," he said, pointing to a spot on the map. "It's been abandoned for years. We can lay low there for a while until we figure out our next move." The apartment felt suffocating as they prepared to leave. Jamal's heart pounded, every creak in the floorboards or muffled sound from the hallway making him jump. "Stay close to me," Malik instructed as they slipped out into the night. The city was dark and eerily quiet, the aftermath of the flood still evident in the waterlogged streets. Jamal clutched his backpack tightly as they moved quickly through narrow alleys. The air was heavy, every shadow feeling like a pair of eyes watching them. As they rounded a corner, Jamal froze. Ahead, two figures were standing beneath a flickering streetlight. Tyrone and one of his men. "Back up," Malik whispered, motioning for them to retreat. The family ducked into another alley, their footsteps muffled against the wet pavement. Jamal's breath quickened as they moved deeper into the maze of back streets, hoping to put as much distance as possible between them and the danger behind. The mechanic's shop was dark and cold, the scent of oil and rust lingering in the air. Malik fumbled with a rusted key, finally managing to push the heavy door open. "Get inside," he said, ushering Anita and Jamal in before shutting the door behind them. Anita sank onto an old workbench, rocking Lily gently to calm her soft whimpers. Jamal leaned against the wall, his legs trembling from the tension of the night. Malik lit a small lantern, its faint glow casting long shadows across the room. "We'll stay here for now," Malik said, his voice steady but tired. "No one knows about this place. We're safe for tonight." Jamal's relief was short-lived. A faint noise outside, a shuffle of footsteps on gravel, sent a jolt of fear through him. Malik held up a hand for silence, grabbing a wrench from the workbench. "Stay here," he whispered. Jamal couldn't just sit by. He grabbed a screwdriver, following his father to the door despite Anita's protests. The footsteps grew louder, stopping just outside the door. Malik took a deep breath and yanked the door open. "Whoa, whoa, it's me!" a voice said, panicked. Jamal blinked in surprise. "Marcus?" Marcus, Jamal's best friend, stood there, his hands raised. "I had to warn you," he said quickly, his eyes darting nervously. "Tyrone's looking for you. He's got people watching your block, the store, everywhere. He knows you've got the baby." "How did you find us?" Malik demanded, his tone sharp. "I followed you," Marcus admitted. "I made sure no one saw me. I swear." Jamal wanted to believe him, but something about Marcus's jittery demeanor didn't sit right. "You need to leave," Malik said firmly. "The less you're involved, the safer you'll be." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Just be careful, man. Tyrone's serious about this." As Marcus slipped away, Jamal turned to his father. "You don't trust him, do you?" "No," Malik said, his jaw tight. "Whether he means to or not, he's already put us in more danger. We can't stay here any longer." The family packed up again, moving quickly and quietly through the city. Every step felt like a risk, every shadow a potential threat. As they neared an abandoned lot, the sound of voices stopped them in their tracks. "Where the hell do you think they went?" a man's voice growled. "Tyrone's crew," Malik whispered, motioning for them to duck behind an old car. The lot was a labyrinth of rusted vehicles and debris. The family crouched low, holding their breath as footsteps approached. Jamal's heart pounded in his chest, the tension almost unbearable. A shadow passed close, a flashlight beam sweeping over the car they hid behind. Jamal tightened his grip on his backpack, ready to run if they were discovered. But the footsteps moved on, fading into the distance. Malik motioned for them to move, leading them deeper into the lot and away from the danger. By the time they reached another hiding spot, a rundown storage unit on the city's outskirts, they were exhausted. "We can't keep running like this," Anita said, her voice breaking. "We don't have a choice," Malik replied, his tone resolute. "Not until we find a way out of this." Jamal sat down beside his mother, his mind racing. The weight of their situation pressed heavily on his chest, but one thing was clear. They couldn't afford to stop now. The night was suffocatingly still as the family huddled in the cramped storage unit. Malik crouched near the door, his ears straining for any sound outside. Jamal sat close to Anita, who cradled Lily in her arms. The baby had fallen asleep, her tiny breaths soft and steady, but the tension in the room was unbearable. "They're going to find us," Jamal whispered, his voice trembling. "Tyrone, the cops. It's only a matter of time." Malik didn't turn around. His voice was calm, but the edge of worry was unmistakable. "Not if we leave now. I've been thinking about it. If we split up, they'll have a harder time tracking us." "What?" Anita's voice broke the silence, sharp and fearful. "Malik, no. We stay together. That's the only way." "They're closing in, Anita," Malik said, finally standing and turning to face her. "If we stay in one place, it's over. You and Jamal take Lily and head east, toward the train yard. I'll lead them away." "No!" Jamal jumped to his feet, his fists clenched. "You can't. You'll be out there alone. What if they catch you?" "Listen to me, son," Malik said, placing a firm hand on Jamal's shoulder. "This is the only way to keep you all safe. They're after me more than anything. If I draw them away, you'll have a chance to get Lily to safety." Anita's voice cracked. "Malik, please. There has to be another way. We can't lose you." "You won't lose me," Malik said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'll meet you at the train yard. You have my word." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of Malik's decision settled over them like a heavy fog. Then, reluctantly, Anita nodded, tears streaming down her face. Jamal swallowed hard. "You better come back, Dad," he said, his voice shaking. "I will," Malik promised. "Now go." The family slipped out of the storage unit under cover of darkness, moving as quietly as possible. Malik gave them one last look before heading in the opposite direction, his broad frame disappearing into the night. Jamal led the way, clutching the backpack tightly as Anita followed close behind, Lily bundled in her arms. The train yard was several blocks away, but every step felt like a mile. The faint sound of distant voices sent chills down Jamal's spine. "They're still looking," he whispered. Anita nodded, her expression tense. "Keep moving, Jamal. We're almost there." When they finally reached the train yard, the rusted tracks and abandoned rail cars loomed like sentinels in the moonlight. Jamal scanned the area, his heart pounding. There was no sign of Malik. "We'll wait here," Anita said, finding a spot behind an old rail car to hide. "He'll find us." Minutes turned into what felt like hours. Jamal's nerves were frayed as he kept watch, his ears straining for any sound that might signal his father's arrival. Then a noise, a scuffle of footsteps, made his heart leap. He turned, only to see Tyrone step out of the shadows, flanked by two of his men. "Well, well," Tyrone drawled, his flashlight beam landing on Jamal. "Looks like I found the jackpot. Where's the baby?" "Leave us alone," Jamal shouted, stepping in front of Anita and Lily. Tyrone laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "That's not how this works, kid. Hand her over and maybe I'll let you walk away." "Never!" Jamal shouted. Tyrone's face twisted with anger. "Fine. Have it your way." He motioned to his men, who began closing in. Before they could reach them, a loud clang echoed through the yard. Everyone froze as Malik appeared, holding a metal pipe in his hands. "Back off," Malik growled, his voice deadly calm. Tyrone sneered. "Look who decided to show up. Too bad it's too late." Malik didn't wait for a response. He lunged forward, swinging the pipe with all his strength. The fight was chaotic and brutal, Malik's determination pitted against Tyrone's brute force. "Run!" Malik shouted over his shoulder. Jamal hesitated, his eyes wide with fear. "Go, Jamal!" Malik barked. Jamal grabbed Anita's hand, pulling her away as she clutched Lily tightly. They ran, weaving between rail cars, the sounds of the fight fading into the distance. Suddenly, a deafening gunshot shattered the air. Jamal stopped, his breath catching in his throat. "Dad!" he screamed, turning back toward the clearing. Anita grabbed his arm. "No, Jamal! We have to keep going!" But Jamal couldn't move. His legs felt like lead as fear and despair gripped him. Flashing lights cut through the darkness as police cars swarmed the train yard. Officers shouted commands, their voices blending into a chaotic symphony. Jamal ran back to the clearing, his heart pounding. He saw Malik lying on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Tyrone stood nearby, his gun still in his hand, his face twisted with rage. "Drop the weapon!" a police officer shouted, his gun trained on Tyrone. Tyrone hesitated, then dropped the gun with a snarl as officers swarmed him. Jamal fell to his knees beside Malik, tears streaming down his face. "Dad! No! Stay with me!" Malik's eyes fluttered open, a weak smile tugging at his lips. "You're safe," he whispered. "That's all that matters." "Don't say that," Jamal sobbed. "You're going to be okay. The ambulance is coming." Malik's hand tightened weakly around Jamal's. "You did good, son. You protected them." As the paramedics arrived and began tending to Malik, Jamal sat by his side, refusing to leave. The fight was over, but the cost was more than he could bear. In the distance he heard voices calling out, familiar voices. Jamal turned to see a man and woman rushing toward them. It was the Caldwells. They had found Lily. But at what price? The sterile hospital room was silent except for the steady beeping of the monitor by Malik's bed. Jamal sat beside him, his hands clutching his father's, willing him to wake up. Anita stood nearby, gently rocking Lily, whose soft coos provided the only warmth in the cold, clinical space. The door creaked open, and Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell stepped in cautiously, their faces filled with gratitude and guilt. Mrs. Caldwell clutched Lily's favorite stuffed toy, her hands trembling. "Is he—" Mrs. Caldwell started, her voice breaking. "He's alive," Jamal said firmly, though his voice wavered. He didn't look at them, his focus fixed on Malik. "Barely." Mr. Caldwell stepped closer, his eyes meeting Jamal's. "We owe you everything," he said softly. "Your family saved our daughter. You risked your lives to keep her safe." Jamal's jaw clenched. "And look where that got us," he shot back. "My dad's in this bed because of all this. Tyrone came after us for the reward money you offered." "We never meant for this to happen," Mrs. Caldwell said, tears streaming down her face. She moved toward Anita, who hesitated before handing Lily to her biological mother. Lily stirred in her sleep, her tiny hand wrapping around Mrs. Caldwell's finger. "She was safe with us," Anita said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "But she belongs with you." Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. "We're going to make things right," he said. "We've already spoken with the hospital. All of Malik's medical expenses are covered, and we've set up a trust fund for your family, a way to ensure you never have to worry again." Jamal looked up, his eyes narrowing. "You think money will fix this? It won't bring back what we lost. It won't take away the fear we lived with." "No, it won't," Mr. Caldwell admitted, his voice heavy with remorse. "But it's a start. Please, let us help." Weeks later, Malik was finally discharged from the hospital, though his recovery would be long and difficult. The family's tiny apartment was replaced by a modest but comfortable home, far from the dangers of their old neighborhood. And while life had begun to stabilize, the memory of those harrowing days lingered. One evening, as the sun set over their new neighborhood, Jamal sat on the porch steps, staring at the horizon. Malik joined him, walking slowly with the help of a cane. "You've been quiet," Malik said, easing himself down beside his son. Jamal shrugged. "Just thinking. About everything. About how close we came to losing it all." "But we didn't," Malik said firmly, "because we stuck together. You saved us, Jamal. You didn't just save Lily, you saved this family." Jamal looked at his father, his chest tightening with emotion. I just wanted to do the right thing." "And you did," Malik said, resting a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "The world's not perfect, son. It's unfair, and it's cruel. But you showed courage when it mattered most. Don't ever forget that." "What do you think about this story? If you were in Jamal's shoes, would you have made the same decisions? How would you handle the pressure, the fear, and the overwhelming responsibility? If you had to rate this story, how many points would you give it? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Your comments and feedback are invaluable and help us improve with every story. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping emotional tales. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories that inspire, move, and connect us all. Thank you for joining us on this journey. May you have an incredible day filled with hope and good fortune. See you in the next story.